The more that time goes by, the closer that we are to the release of Marvel Tōkon, and we still have 2 teams and 6 characters that have not been announced yet. So in this video, we're going to be discussing and trying to predict which characters are going to make it into the teams for Doom and Ghost Rider. And if I'm not mistaken, I actually predicted the Avengers team correctly, so we're on a good track to get the correct predictions for the roster of the game. Like and subscribe if you want to see more content for Marvel Talk on the channel, or you want to support the channel. I would appreciate it a ton. Thank you. And now let's get into the predictions. Okay, so first we have to clarify a couple of things when it comes to doing the predictions. Number one is that the themes of the teams have been already kind of like made public in an interview with the developers, in which they say that Doctor Doom is going to be team villains and Ghost Rider is going to be team like anti-heroes / outlaws. So we already have the general topic, and that is of course going to help with the predictions. And on top of that, there's also hints in many of the trailers. For example, in the latest one for the Avengers, we got a ton of hints for Carnage and kind of like a Spider-Man villain, to say the least, in terms of the category of the hint. And then there's also some hints in the Spider-Man trailer from a while ago that we have really not seen with any of the new characters that have been real. So I'm gonna take into account all of those hints, with the predictions, but it's not gonna be the only factors for choosing the characters. Okay, so let's start with the case of Doctor Doom and team villains. And there are so many characters that you can put in this team that it's gonna be pretty hard to predict, especially when ArcSys is clearly trying to push a couple of more, unknown characters like Danger or Penny Parker on the roster, but it's going to be really fun to try and see what we get with the case of Doom and the villains. And I have one theory, specifically for this team, which is that I think that because the overall roster of this game is very clearly designed around episode mode or the story mode of the game, I believe that the team of villains is actually going to have one villain that is for each one of the other respective teams in the roster. So for example, we have Doom at the moment as the leader, and I think that Doom is going to be essentially the villain of the Avengers in the story mode alongside the main baseline, storyline with the champion, right? Then on top of that, if we get Carnage, because of the hints, is going to be the villain or Spider-Man team, right? And things like that. So we lack essentially one pick for the X-Men as a villain and one for the team of Ghost Rider. And I think that for the case of the X-Men, there is a lot of stuff that you can do. The most obvious one is just putting Magneto on the game. Magneto is arguably one of the most famous Marvel characters out there, especially as a villain. But the thing is, over the last few years, Magneto is not necessarily a villain anymore in the comics. It depends a lot on the storyline. In the case of the movies, it's kind of like even the same thing. By the end of the last, X-Men movies, Magneto was kind of not a villain, to be completely honest. But it is something that you can, of course, add into the game, since it is its own universe and story, and you can make Magneto the bad guy, and everybody's gonna be happy with that. The only reason why, to me, Magneto could not make it in the base roster is only because he has so much kind of like DLC aura. It's a character that can make you earn so much money if you sell him as a DLC, just like, for example, Akuma on Street Fighter 6 or Heihachi on Tekken 8. Is that a style of character, that guy that everybody's gonna put their money for? So I wouldn't be surprised if Magneto doesn't make it on the base roster, only because of that DLC power that he has as a post-launch sellable character. Then if that happens and Magneto doesn't make it in the base roster, I think that the X-Men villain spot on Doom's team is either going to be Apocalypse or Mr. Sinister. I think that those two characters pretty much deserve an opportunity to be in a fighting game. They have never been on one before. They also make a lot of sense for ArcSys and the style of character that they like, visually, aesthetically speaking, and they could be extremely cool characters in terms of gameplay and what they could do overall in the actual design of the powers and abilities that the characters could have. So if Magneto doesn't make it, I would bet my money that either Mr. Sinister or Apocalypse are going to take the spot as one of the big X-Men villains in the game. And then if that's not the case, if we get into an extreme point and not even those two make it, I think that there's gonna be a female X-Men villain, even if they're not always a villain in the comics, and it's going to be either Mystique or Emma Frost. I think that those two picks could also make it very easily on Doom's team, even with the theme of the Caval ride for Doom with Emma on it. Even if she's not a real villain, still, I think that those two characters are the female options for the X-Men. So you essentially have 5 picks, in my opinion, for that X-Men villain spot. Magneto as the obvious pick, Mr. Sinister and Apocalypse as the alternatives if Magneto makes it as DLC. And if those two don't make it and they really want to push an X-Men villain that is a female for that team in particular, then it could be Emma Frost or Mystique. I think those are the most reasonable ones, specifically for the X-Men villain character on Doom's team. But then what happens with the villain in Doom's team that is attached to Ghost Rider and his team, right? If my theory of, having one specific villain for all the teams in the game becomes right or true. And I think that for that case, there is very special picks that you could put in the team that would make a ton of sense, and at the same time, they would give you kind of like a more obscure character in the roster, like the case of Danger, right, or Penny, and things like that. And I was thinking personally of characters like, for example, Mephisto or Dracula. Even though they are not that obscure when compared to somebody like Danger, they are still not as famous as somebody like Magneto or Doom, right? So I wouldn't be surprised if characters like those two can make it maybe into the base roster. The other one that I was thinking was actually Lilith. I think that Lilith could also make it as the female pick of the villain's team and be the villain for the Ghost Rider team as well at the same time. It would make a ton of sense. Then I guess that there's also the case that maybe there is a more kind of like Doctor Strange attached villain if a Strange is with Ghost Rider, and could be Dormammu, for example. At the end of the day, Dormammu is only on one Marvel vs. Capcom game. It's not that popular of a character within the context of the franchise compared to other picks, so it could maybe still happen. And I guess you could also consider a character like Blackheart making it into the game as a villain for the Ghost Rider team to have that nemesis. But the thing is that Blackheart has been in multiple Marvel vs. Capcom games, right? Dormammu was only on Marvel vs. Capcom 3, but Blackheart has been, I think, on 2 or 3 different NBC related games, so I don't think that Blackheart is gonna make it. And if there's going to be kind of like, primary Ghost Rider villain in the team for Doom, is probably, I would say, I will put my money at least on Mephisto, Dracula, or Lilith. I think those 3 picks are the ones that make the most sense if you try to attach a Ghost Rider or Midnight Suns or whatever type of villain into the team for Doom. But then to me, here is where things could get a little bit boring. In my opinion, at least, is something more personal preference. For you, it could be great actually, and that is the specific case of Wanda or Scarlet Witch, because I just have the feeling that Wanda is going to make it into this game 100%. But the thing about Wanda is that she can be anything. You can put her with Doom and make her a villain very easily, but she could be the villain for Ghost Rider. She could even be the villain for the X-Men if you want to. She can literally be whatever you want. It's kind of like what the character does, in the comics and in the movies and everything related to media and Marvel. Like, Wanda is like a shapeshifter when it comes to the roles that she has in storylines and what she does as a character. So she could literally take the spot of a villain in Doom's team and be attached to anybody, essentially, as kind of like their arch nemesis. And then on top of that, Wanda could also be with Ghost Rider and be kind of like an anti-hero. So it's really hard to predict, but I wanted to talk about the case of Wanda now when we're discussing Doom's team, because I believe that she could very easily make it as a villain and then replace, the picks that I was talking about, like Lilith, like, for example, Dracula, Mephisto, and things like that, or even replace somebody like Magneto, and then she's the X-Men villain. So don't be surprised, I would say, if Wanda makes it into the game and she's one of the villains and replaces whoever, because she can be anything. And the last thing that I wanted to mention when it comes to Doom's team is that even though there's a lot of hints for Carnage, right, in the last trailer, with him as the Spider-Man villain of the game, I still think that anybody could make it as a Spider-Man villain, and it's not going to be Carnage kind of like the only option because of the hints. It could still be somebody like Green Goblin, it could still be Doc Ock, it could even be the Red Goblin, to have a mix of Carnage and the Green Goblin in one character. I think that, pick based on only the hints is kind of like extreme. The hints until now have not been necessarily the best when it comes to trying to predict the picks in the roster. So even if there is full, of Carnage hints and everything, I think that other Spider-Man villain could still make it. Okay, so now let's move into the case of Ghost Rider and his team, which is, Team Anti-Hero or Team Outlaw. And there are so many things you can mix here to make this team. It's kind of like a very vague topic when you think about it. But the most obvious ones to me that you could consider are characters like Blade, for example, also Moon Knight, even somebody like Deadpool or Gwenpool. All of those characters could very easily make it into the team. Then you also have the case of somebody like Doctor Strange being a part of the Midnight Suns and being such a popular character. That could also be the case, and he could for sure make it into the game through Ghost Rider's team instead of the Avengers, right? And there are so many other characters that are very, very popular that you could consider as well. For example, Daredevil, I guess, could still make it in this team. It wouldn't be that bad to think about him as an anti-hero or an outlaw, depending on how you treat the character, right? Then you also have stuff like Loki, for example, the Punisher, maybe even somebody like Winter Soldier slash Bucky, I think that all those characters could have an argument to take a slot with Ghost Rider, and it's really hard to choose only a couple. I'm gonna try, to shrink the overall options, but the idea in this video, to me at least, is to mostly discuss the overarching things that could happen, not to choose only the 4 characters that are actually gonna make it 100% into the game. But in my opinion, I would say that the only character from all of this that has almost 100% of making it is going to be Blade. I think that Blade just has such a strong case because Daredevil was not with Spider-Man, which is what we thought was going to happen initially, right? Then on top of that, Blade is just the perfect Arc System Wars character. In many ways, it is a character pretty much thought for Arc Sys as a company for the type of character that they like to design in terms of gameplay, in terms of visuals. Like, if Blade doesn't make it in the base roster, to me, it would be a very big surprise. I think that he's the one that has the biggest chances to be a safe pick for the Ghost Rider team. Then the other character that I would consider has a really strong case is Deadpool slash Gwenpool. And the reason for that is because there are hints on it, right? Like in the last trailer, there's this stick with like a marshmallow on top of Ghost Rider's head. And a lot of people have put posts online that that's a hint for somebody like Deadpool or Gwenpool making it on that team. They also said that the team is going to be anti-hero based, and that is pretty much the definition of characters like Deadpool or Gwenpool. So I wouldn't be surprised if that character also makes it, one of those into the roster with Ghost Rider. But the problem for me is that both Deadpool and Gwenpool have the same type of energy than Magneto. They could very easily be DLC. They are the Akumas, the Heihachis of these characters, and they could take a spot as a post-launch character to get a lot of sales and have super successful, DLC after the game actually comes out. So even though I would consider Deadpool slash Gwenpool to be a very strong case for the base roster alongside Ghost Rider, I still think that the DLC power is too high, and it could be, sadly, kind of like a reason to not put them on the start and save them for later. The other thing for Ghost Rider's team is that, in my opinion, it is arguably one of the best spots in the entire roster to add another kind of like obscure character in comparison to the popularity of the other picks that we have been discussing. And there are so many super cool obscure picks that you can put alongside Ghost Rider. Like, for example, Man-Thing, right? A lot of people have been saying online that they want to see Man-Thing in the game. And one specific excuse to do it also, if you consider it, is that the game until now doesn't have a grappler. There is not a single grappler in the game, and Hulk, right, the only big body character alongside Penny, I guess, but Penny is more like a weirdo gadget character than a big body, even if she has the giant robot. But Hulk, for example, right, he's not really a grappler. From what it seems in the trailer, he's more like a brawler, armor type of character. So there is still no command grab pick in the entire game, and that could very easily be somebody like Man-Thing and mix it with other styles of attack that are maybe mid-range and stuff like that. So that could be an obscure pick to add into the game. There's a lot of others that you could consider, like for example also Werewolf by Night. I think could very easily make it into the game. Is a very cool pick. Kind of like a weirdo when you compare it to the rest of the popularity in the roster, and it wouldn't be super insane, to think that Arc Sys would consider a character that is a werewolf to make it into the roster. It kind of like fits with Arc Sys as well, in terms of what they like when it comes to doing more crazy characters. There's also, other picks, like for example, Nico Minoru. A lot of people have mentioned that online, that they maybe want to see that character in the game. Agent Venom, even though it is not super obscure, I think that it could maybe happen if you want a different version of Venom. You put Carnage with Doom, and then you put Agent Venom with Ghost Rider, and not the classic Venom, right, to make something different. And also that helps you to have a character in the game that is gun-based, because there is also no pick in the entire roster that has guns. And Arc System Works is pretty much a company that loves their gun characters. In almost every single game, there is a character with guns. There is a character with a gun on Guilty Gear Strive that has been essentially torturing the entire player base for years. And that same thing happens with multiple games in the case of Arc Sys. They really like their gun characters. So I wouldn't be surprised if Agent Venom, for example, makes it, or even the Punisher. That's the other pick that for sure could make it as a gun-based character, because of course Punisher is pretty much that. So there are so many different picks that you can put into the game, whether they are, like super famous or more obscure, especially for the case of Ghost Rider. So it's pretty hard to predict. I would say that you're at least gonna get one weirdo pick with Ghost Rider for sure. Like I said, it could be Werewolf, it could be Nico Minoru, right? It could be also, for example, somebody like Man-Thing and stuff like that. And then the other thing is that you're gonna get a female, of course, on the team 100%. Like, until now, it is very obvious that every single team has a female character. So I guess that Wanda still can be a part of the discussion here. You know, if Wanda doesn't make it with Doom, then maybe she could make it here, and you get Ghost Rider, Wanda, Man-Thing, and somebody like, I don't know, Blade, for example. A team like that, there's just so many combinations. It's really tough to kind of like predict the 4 specific characters, but the picks in general for the case of Ghost Rider and his team, in my opinion, are some of the most interesting, to be honest. But then, you know, just to end the video on a high note and to make it more fun, especially since we got the predictions right the last time for the Avengers, let's actually try to choose the 4 picks for each of the 2 teams left. And for the case of Doom, I'm going to say that it's going to be Magneto for the X-Men villain. Then for the Spider-Man villain, it's going to be Carnage, because the hints are really strong and super specific this time compared to the last trailer. So I think that in this case, they are really trying to tell us one of the characters right. And then the last one, the female and more obscure pick at the same time, I think is going to be Lilith. I think that Lilith is going to be the villain for the overall Doom team that is going to be the more weirdo pick, the female pick as well, and she's going to be directly the villain of the Ghost Rider team. So it is the perfect combo, essentially, to put that one character with Doom. And then for the team of Ghost Rider, I'm gonna say that Blade is gonna make it 100%. I think that the chances of Blade being in the game are too high. He just makes too much sense. And if he doesn't make it, it wouldn't be only a significant disappointment, but at the same time, just weird that ArcSys wouldn't prioritize a character like Blade when he has never been on a fighting game before, and he's a perfect Arc System Works character. Then the next one is going to be Wanda. I think that Wanda is going to make it more as an anti-hero character, not as a villain, and she's going to be alongside Ghost Rider and Blade on that team. And then for the last character alongside Ghost Rider, Wanda, and Blade, I'm gonna bet my money on Man-Thing. The reason for that is just that it makes a ton of sense when you start to actually think about it. There's not a single grappler in the game. There are not that many big body characters also in the entire roster. And it is also an obscure, kind of like weirdo pick that you wouldn't put as DLC. And when you start thinking about all the other characters alongside, you know, the team for Ghost Rider that could make it, a lot of them make sense as DLC. Moon Knight, you know, Punisher, Daredevil, all of them make a ton of sense. Doctor Strange, right? All of those could sell a lot of money super well after launch. So those are going to be my predictions. It's pretty hard to get these ones though. Much harder than the Avengers, which is the one that we got the last time. That was much easier when you compare it. So hopefully we get a ton of cool characters. Let me know in the comments which ones you would like to see. Which characters are you expecting to see in the base roster? Like and subscribe if you want to see more content for Tōkon or support the channel. I would appreciate it a ton. And if you would like to have more information about Marvel Tōkon and the different contexts in which we could get a ton of announcements and surprises, check this video that I did a while ago, in which I essentially discussed all the big gaming events in which we could get trailers for the game until the launch date in August. It's gonna be a lot of fun, and well, thank you for watching again, and see you on the next one. Take care.